Modern court isn't exactly somewhere I want to be spending any of my time currently. Never mind courts throughout history where punishment by torment was a regular way of being. I'll stick to torment through performing, thank you very much. So question for you, what's the craziest court story you've ever heard? Let me know in the comments and I'll see if I can top that today. How about we start off with the first thing that popped into my mind, animal court. Yep, Fido and Mittens could be dragged in front of a criminal court back in the day if they didn't follow animal law. There are records of at least 85 animal trials that took place during medieval times, and the tales vary from the tragic to the absurd. By far the most serial offenders were pigs, accused and convicted of chewing off body parts and even eating tiny humans. Most were found guilty and sentenced to the rope necklace or even being burned at the stake like traditional witches. In 1386, a convicted pig was dressed in a waistcoat, gloves, drawers, and a human mask for its execution. Granted, it wasn't just pigs that felt the hand of the law though. In 1474, a court found a rooster guilty of the unnatural crime of laying an egg. Unwanted rats often found themselves on the receiving end of a strongly worded letter asking them to get the heck out. And curiously enough, there was a trial of dolphins in Marseille in 1596. Granted, not all the trials ended in brutality. One donkey, which found herself the victim of unwanted advances, was proclaimed innocent after a strong recommendation from a commons prior, declaring her to be a virtuous and well-behaved animal. Hey look, if anybody wants to hold court for modern dogs that chew up furniture, be my guest. I don't think much surprises me anymore. Well, let's see. Has anybody heard about the dead Pope trial? Alright, picture the late 800s, a tumultuous time for popes as Charlemagne's once mighty empire crumbled into scattered different areas, each eyeing Rome's treasury. The papacy weakened, sought alliances with secular leaders to maintain influence. Enter Bishop Formosus of Portus, a rising figure in Catholic circles managing church matters across Europe. Despite commendable work, this bishop found himself on the wrong side of political disputes. Accused of crimes under church law, he was convicted, defrocked, and excommunicated by Pope John VIII. But, in the intricate dance of medieval politics, his excommunication was lifted 6 years later. Released from his oath, he returned to his diocese and in a twist of fate, became Pope in 891. When he died in 896, his legacy remained tangled in political webs. Enter Pope Stephen VI, pressured by folks who harbored a grudge against the previous pope. The infamous Cadaver Synod unfolded, a grotesque spectacle where the previous pope's rotting corpse was put on trial. Now Pope Stephen appointed himself prosecutor, hurling insults at the lifeless remains, accusing the former pope of posthumous crimes. The charges ranged from performing bishop duties after promising not to, assuming the papacy, to conspiring against a previous pope. In a macabre climax, the three fingers used for blessings were hacked off, the papal crown removed, and the body tossed into the Tiber River. The aftermath saw monks retrieving the corpse, rumors of miraculous events, and local bishops staging a Vatican coup. Decrees of the Cadaver Synod were annulled, reinstated, and the bones were shuffled between resting places, so hopefully the poor guy is finally resting in peace, because that's just wild. Y'all have heard about trial by combat, right? Even though it was technically first practiced by Germanic peoples, it was sometimes used to settle disputes in medieval Europe. Not everybody was allowed to fight, but there are records of monasteries fighting other monasteries and wives fighting their husbands. Generally the loser would be executed, but this didn't always happen. In 979, the royal court in the Holy Roman Empire set up a trial by combat between Count Gero of Elseben and a Saxon named Waldo. The historical record isn't super duper clear about why the men fought, but Waldo brought some kind of charge against Gero, and Gero was arrested. Look, back in the day you didn't need a million pages of evidence and Harvey Specter to win a case, okay? So in the battle, Gero cut Waldo's neck, but Waldo disabled Gero with a blow to the head, winning the fight. Right after beating Gero, however, Waldo collapsed dead. So you'd think dying would have ruined Waldo's victory, but the judges still insisted that the dead man won. Since Gero was a technical loser, Emperor Otto II ordered for the count to be decapitated, so nobody really won this one. If you thought we were gonna make it through today without a single witchcraft case, you'd be mistaken. Stedlin of Boltingen was a Swiss farmer who lived in the municipality of Boltingen sometime between 1392 and 1406. So one year when his crop yield was better than his neighbors, rumors spread that he was a sorcerer. It was said that he only had such a good yield because he used magic to transport crops from other people's fields. He could also supposedly control the weather and caused a local woman to miscarry 7 times in a row. Eventually, Stedlin was arrested and confessed to being a sorcerer after being tormented. He claimed that he was in contact with demons, and those demons would summon thunderstorms after he tossed a black chicken up into the air. As for his neighbor's trouble with bearing offspring, he said her infertility was the result of a lizard he buried on her property. He also revealed that his wife was a witch and recommended that the authorities not believe her if she said otherwise. For his confession, this man was burned at the stake, while his wife got the same punishment for not confessing. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't, damned all around. I think we're gonna hit on all of the old expressions today, so we might as well get trial by fire out of the way now. In late 15th century Florence, the Dominican preacher and reformer Girolamo Savonarola was one of the most powerful men in the city. He attacked the government and the Catholic Church, and also claimed to be a prophet in touch with God. In 1494, Florence became a democratic republic, and Savonarola became its new leader. Didn't last long though. 3 years later, Savonarola was excommunicated by the Pope for his rebellious behavior and preaching. So the next year, a rival named Francesco da Puglia challenged Savonarola to a trial by fire to prove that the Pope was correct to banish him. The logic of the trial was this: if Savonarola could walk through fire without being burned, then it would show that God was on his side and the Pope was wrong. So the trial was held on April 7th. A crowd gathered to watch the spectacle, because, why not? What else are you gonna do? But Savonarola and his supporters ended up arguing with the other side until a thunderstorm broke out and put out the fire. So after that fiasco, Savonarola was arrested, confessed to being a false prophet, and was sentenced to the rope necklace with 2 of his supporters. Next up, we have a case of somebody just trying to make a damn living. John Rykener was a 14th century Londoner who lived quite the double life. Not Hannah Montana style, but just wait. He was a playboy who had very fun encounters with countless women, for pleasure, but he also dressed up as a woman and worked as a lady of the night under the name Eleanor. Sadly, one day John was picked up by city officials after being caught with a client in a stall in the street. The client told authorities that he paid for intercourse with John, but had no idea that John was, biologically male. John, dressed as Eleanor, admitted the truth of the situation and then turned over a pretty embarrassing list of other men he'd slept with for money. 3 of John's clients were aristocratic scholars, and many of the others were chaplains, friars, and priests, which that goes against their vows. John seemed to have a thing for holy people, because he also slept with nuns for free while dressed as a man, because you gotta be charitable about it. Sadly, there aren't any records about what happened to him after his arrest, but if he wasn't let go for his embarrassing testimony, he was probably convicted of sodomy. You know the old saying, those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it? Yeah, we're gonna revisit that in just a second. So in medieval times, leprosy was thought to be highly contagious. Medieval Europeans were very paranoid about catching the disease, so lepers were shunned and segregated from mainstream society. I'm seeing similarities to the AIDS epidemic, and the stigma that has followed the condition to this day. So lepers were not only considered unclean, but also suspicious and untrustworthy. In spring of 1321, a story began to spread in southern France that lepers were plotting to poison wells and infect the entire country with leprosy, so they could overthrow the government and take control of France. Now, of course, the entire story was fake, but King Philip V ordered that all the country's lepers be arrested and put on trial for treason. Hysterical mobs killed lepers with impunity, while those who actually got trials were tormented and burned at the stake. By the end of the year, when the frenzy had largely subsided, thousands of lepers had died in massacres and trials. Nobody in power bothered to apologize until 1338, when the Pope, then centered in the French city of Avignon, acknowledged that the lepers were innocent. About damn time. Next up in our type of trials is none other than trials by ordeal, which were rites designed to invoke divine intervention for a just outcome. The belief was that if a defendant were truly innocent, God would step in and work a miracle to avert a miscarriage of justice. Far from a theatrical charade, people of the medieval world really believed in God's vigilant oversight, incapable of allowing an innocent to be wrongly accused. Now, these trials were not for the faint-hearted. Defendants faced challenges like walking over hot irons or retrieving stones from boiling water, their innocence hinging on the timely healing of inflicted injuries. In a more bizarre version involving cold water, bound suspects were tossed in to sink or float, as water, believed to be pure, had the power to repel sin. One intriguing but historically questionable tale involves Emma of Normandy, accused of adultery with Bishop Elfwine of Winchester. Convinced of her innocence, Emma volunteered for the ordeal of hot iron. The Archbishop of Canterbury agreed, but only with rigorous conditions. To quote him, "Let the ill-famed woman walk 9 paces, with bare feet on 9 red-hot plowshares, 4 to clear herself and 5 to clear the bishop. If she falters, if she does not press one of the plowshares fully with her feet, if she is harmed the one least bit, then let her be judged a fornicator." So Emma, led by bishops, walked the red-hot path in a church, invoking divine intervention. According to chroniclers, she navigated this entire thing unscathed, seemingly oblivious to the searing heat. So afterwards, her feet were examined, or so the report goes, and they were found to be uninjured. So, hello, a miracle. Emma was found innocent of the charge and free to go, with all her confiscated property restored. Hey, I love a good miracle story, don't you? So remember earlier when I mentioned how animals used to be put on trial? They weren't alone in that. Any kind of critter could be sent to court. Like even insects weren't immune to prosecution. Not that I particularly want them to be. Throughout this time period in Europe, there were many cases of court-sanctioned bug bashing, with church authorities acting as a sort of holy pest control company. Pope Stephen VI even once sprayed a pesticide of holy water around Rome's rural outskirts. I wonder, like, holy exterminators? Could that be a thing? Pulpit pronouncements were often used in conjunction with trials, and on occasion the insects would even be told in writing, or verbally, that they would like it much better in a neighboring village. In 1478 in Switzerland, seed beetles were prosecuted for wreaking havoc on crops. After much public reprimanding of the insects and head scratching from local dignitaries, the Bishop of Lausanne issued a cease and desist order to the bugs. Now the insects ignored this, so then the bishop ordered them to leave the land within 6 days, proclaiming that these creatures were not passengers on Noah's Ark and were so open, and ergo were open to excommunication. If they refused to leave, they were ordered to appear in Avanches to explain their refusal to budge. The records don't mention whether they turned up in Avanches, but the next year they were back, and the church blamed the pest's continuing presence on the sins of the people. Sins which they could offset by coughing up more tithe money, incidentally. Wow, I'm so shocked. More money for the church so we could get rid of things? And since I'm in a funny mood, let's end today with another buggy case, if you will. In Mainz, Germany, local people brought a prosecution against some Spanish flies. Now if you're unaware of them, they're also known as a blister beetle and are dangerous to livestock and ruinous to vegetation. Hence the furious Rhineland farmers were happy to see the church court weigh in on these mischievous mini-beasts. In view of their small size, the judge appointed for them a learned defender who represented his clients with great dignity. Well, to the shock and surprise of nobody, the court banished them, kindly approving an allocated plot of land for the creepy crawlies to retire to. Now, we're not sure if the puny prisoners made it to their reservation, but any failure on this case was likely pinned on the townsfolk's lack of religion. Go figure. And that brings us to the end of our time, and I have a mind to ask a lawyer buddy of mine how much of this could still hold up in court today. I've been Alexa, your resident emo girly, and hey, if you enjoyed my ramblings today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, and I'll see y'all next time I buzz in over here at Bumblebee.